16-7. So the genius talents of the 16-7 is bringing spiritual knowledge into common society and being magnetic, authentic, decisive, and being heart-based and connecting people. So the mastered expression of the 16-7 is becoming the translator of spiritual knowledge into everyday language. So a few examples of the 16-7 is, and before we get into it, really what's happening is we've got the 16 over here bringing high-level spiritual knowledge down to the earth in a way that people can easily understand, okay? And not using fancy, esoteric, hard to understand concepts. And then the 7 draws people together. First of all, the person has their heart opened and they're speaking and living authentically from their heart. And that draws people to them. Okay, so that's where the heart-based connector comes in. So a few examples of this is, for example, Bruce Lipton. So Dr. Bruce Lipton, his work really is describing scientifically what's going on in the body, what's the mental emotional connection, how can our mind and our emotional patterns change our body and change the DNA in our body. And so a lot of spiritual principles are about transformation of the self, alchemy of the self. And there's many different ways to describe it. So for an example, with Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's bringing a scientific Western approach to these concepts of self-transformation. And the 16-7 often isn't, well, let's say that it's the translator of spiritual knowledge into everyday language for a reason. So when we think about spiritual people, we think about, just think about the traditional guru, etc. This isn't the energy of the 16-7 because that is the energy of just, using esoteric language, and then one person is the dispenser of the wisdom. This 16-7 energy is really taking high-level concepts and putting them in everyday language. And that's why they're kind of hidden, so to speak. You wouldn't necessarily think, oh, is that person really sharing spiritual knowledge? But the more you get into it, and you can see, whoa, okay, this is a distillation of high-level concepts in new language that just makes sense. And that's the thing about simplicity is, by nature, it doesn't show what's behind the surface, behind the scenes. Only a person can see what's behind the scenes of simplicity when they are really mastered in that topic themselves. But to everybody else, it just looks simple. And isn't it always like that way? Well, no, it's not. So another example is Naval Ravikant. So Naval has a free podcast series of mini podcast clips on creating wealth. And that's another example of very down-to-earth, everyday language, but it's really speaking to the concept of becoming a self-actualized version of a person's self, and also doing your part to contribute to the evolution of humanity. But again, it's doing it from a very down-to-earth perspective, and it's not saying that in order to help yourself, in order to help humanity, you have to believe in this one thing. It's not doing that. And that's also the 16-7 energy, is that really bringing it down to earth, and it's not bringing it in a package of dogma of saying that, oh, you got to believe this. It's just distilling it into everyday language that everyone can understand and be a part of. Another one is David Goggins. And I wouldn't say this with all of his work necessarily, but you really see it in his book at the end, and how he speaks about encountering challenges. Because on the quote-unquote spiritual path, on the self-development path, on the rise to self-actualization, we're going to encounter our resistance patterns. We're going to encounter our shadows. We're going to encounter the parts of ourselves that we might be initially embarrassed about. We might be initially ashamed about. We might initially have guilt about. But part of the process of self-actualization is bringing light to those shadows and alchemizing them into service, into positive actions for ourselves and the world. So with his, we see that, through physical activity, the alchemy that can happen, and all the ways that our resistance patterns can try and stop us, but the process of moving forward and be connecting to a higher purpose. And that's why a lot of, throughout the ages on the quest to enlightenment, to the quest to ascension in the spiritual context, there's been different orders of monks or whatever it might be, where physical pain, whether it's athletic physical pain or even some extreme cases where it's just self-pain, self-inflicted pain, self-flagellation. It's pain as a gateway to purification. So with David Goggins' deal, we see that how wherever we are, we don't have to be a monk. We don't have to be in a super dogmatic sect or order to then do extreme things to ourselves, so that we can, through every physical thing that we do, whether it's our daily workout or whatever it is, that moment when we want to quit, that itself can actually be a purifying experience to connect deeper to what's driving us. So so I just want to wrap that up with, or kind of put a bow on this concept. So for your journey, becoming the translator of spiritual knowledge into everyday language, one of your gifts is being able to do that. Put simple words, put simple concepts into things that were previously super quote unquote high level, or maybe people had to learn a bunch of stuff before they could understand that. Your gift is simplifying. So an ally to help bring those qualities out more in you, easier and faster, is an ally with 10-1 qualities. So the 10-1 is discernment. So the discernment helps the 7 see what's real, because if they're in the resistance pattern, they've got all these different masks on, and it can be hard to know what's actually real and what's not. So the discernment cuts through that and, like, okay, this is the real you, this is the real world. Here, let's make decisions based on that. And you can trust that because they are balanced in their masculine and feminine energy, because they're not just taking into account one side of the spectrum, one style, one viewpoint. They're taking an optimal balance of both. It doesn't mean they're lukewarm in the middle. It means that they have developed both energies in themselves, so they can take in both viewpoints into account and then make the best decision from there. And the spiritual wisdom helps connect your 16, because the resistance pattern of the 16 is to just say screw off to any spiritual stuff, when that actually is your talent. So the helping a person connect to that allows this genius talent to come faster through you. And just remember, you don't have to get caught up in the language of what it is, how it's introduced to you. Just take the essence of it and then translate it through your own filter. And the stability, strength, integrity, and service, that helps connect the community that you're building. When you're connecting this heart-based community, helps solidify and strengthen that. Okay. And also, when you bring new concepts into everyday language, sometimes people want to test it. So having an ally who really reinforces the stability of your message definitely helps. So take a look in your council right now, see if you have anybody that has these qualities. And if you don't, keep an eye out for someone who does.